Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Adam Dorsey, a psychologist in Silicon Valley and the host of Super Psyched, a podcast dedicated to supercharging your life. Each episode contains fun, high-quality interviews with experts looking at psychology from all angles. Super Psyched is your tool to get more of what you want in your life and less of what you don't. We all know what happens when we invest $1 well. Over time, with compounding interest, that dollar blossoms in value. Yet the same can be said for our habits and behaviors. When we cultivate good habits and behaviors, over time, they can pay us back with compounding interest as well. And this idea relates perfectly to what my guest is working on with children, fostering skills that may pay dividends for the rest of their lives by helping them develop better relationships with their emotions and their friends. As a psychologist who has seen the importance of skills relating to emotions and friendship, I believe early intervention could be a major difference maker. Simply put, I'm blown away by my colleague and new friend, Dr. Eileen Kennedy Moore, and her outstanding work. Eileen is a psychologist in private practice in Princeton, New Jersey, and the author of multiple books written for children and parents, including her most recent, Growing Feelings, a kid's guide to dealing with emotions about friends and other kids, co-written with Christine McLaughlin. Eileen is a major thought leader in psychology, and she's also the host of a podcast about children and friendship that I love, called Kids Ask Dr. Friendtastic. As you'll hear, she's super engaging, her tips are on point, and she has the ability to relay her wisdom in a manner that will empower children and parents. Many adult listeners may listen to this episode and think, I wish I had an Eileen when I was a kid. Well, if you have a theme or variation of that thought, take heart in knowing I thought that too. Please also know it's not too late to incorporate her wisdom as an adult and benefit from it yourself, as well as passing it on to the children in your life. So listen in as Eileen and I talk about children, friendship, and emotions. Dr. Eileen Kennedy Moore, also known as Dr. Friendtastic, welcome to Super Psyched.
Thank you, Adam. I'm just delighted to be here.
I cannot believe that I get to meet you and that you are the person who is dealing with the front end of life. And I have seen what happens to people when they don't know about emotions and friendship later in adulthood. It seems that you are trying to nip it in the bud with your colleague and friend, Christine McLaughlin, in your books, a book about feelings about friends. Amazing that you two created this. What was your hope in writing this book?
Honestly, Adam, if I could do helicopter drops of growing friendships and growing feelings, I would, because friendship is kind of the answer to everything. If you want your child to feel happier, help them make friends. If you want them to be more engaged in school, help them make friends. Be less likely to be bullied, help them make friends. Deal with stressful situations, help them make friends. It really is the answer to everything. And if you think about it, friendship is fundamentally a relationship between equals, a caring relationship between equals. And isn't that what we need in the world? Think of all of the world problems. Friendship would solve it.
I couldn't agree more. And yet there are so many schisms that exist in our understanding of friendship. And children need things in black and white, and they're told, be yourself and also get along. And sometimes these two ideas of being ourselves and finding a way to get along, the first one is kind of have your boundaries as well.
Right.
They can seem incompatible to a child's brain given their development. They can even seem overwhelming to adults. And I'm wondering, there is not much in the curriculum that really addresses friendship. I'm so glad. 100% I agree with the idea that this book should be parachuted all over the planet in various translations. How do you make these? I mean, I've listened to your podcast and that you do make difficult ideas really easy to understand and age appropriate. But how do you address things like that? Be yourself and at the same time find a way to get along.
Well, we have to first understand that friendship skills and feeling skills are teachable and learnable. So just like some kids pick up math out of the air and some kids need a little extra help, some kids need a little extra help with friendship skills. But I think really it's all of us. Even as adults, we are continuing to learn. The number one reaction that I get to my books, Growing Friendships and Growing Feelings, is, oh my gosh, this applies to adults. Of course it does. It's not like at age 9, we master everything and then we're done. We're in new situations and new relationships. We're constantly learning. So in Growing Friendships, we talk about 5 fundamental friendship skills: reaching out to make friends, stepping back to keep friends, blending in to join friends, speaking up to share with friends, and letting go to accept friends. And notice, as you said, a bunch of those are opposites. That's because friendship skills are never about just doing one thing. We have to be able to flexibly adjust our behavior to fit the situation. In Growing Feelings, we talk about the big emotions that come up in friendships. So there are a lot of books out there for kids about emotions, but most of them talk about just one emotion or about emotions in general. The problem is that emotions don't come on one at a time. We usually have multiple emotions, and they're never abstract or general, right? They are focused usually on a particular situation and often a particular relationship. When we teach kids to communicate, cope with, and understand their own and other people's feelings, we equip them for life.
And I love that you have broken down the emotional menu. You talk about anger, guilt, embarrassment, envy, all of these emotions, and you geek out to each one.
I do.
So that a child could actually understand, what can a child do when they actually understand their emotional experiences? How can it help them in the context of friendship?
So how kids handle their emotions has a big impact on whether their friendships continue, grow stronger, fade, or fall apart. One of the central things that we talk about in Growing Feelings is what we call a feelings story. Now, usually when kids get advice about feelings, it's something generic like take deep breaths. I mean, this is fine as far as it goes, but it really doesn't tell us much about, well, what do you do in the friendship? So what we've done in the feelings story is it's a whole big cycle. So it starts with an event. And then it goes to thoughts, because people are meaning-making creatures. As soon as something happens, we think, oh, what does this mean for me? And what does it mean about the future? And what does it mean about that person and how they feel about me? So we're instantly analyzing that. And those thoughts lead to feelings. And those feelings can trigger actions. And now we're crossing the line from inside us to outside, the observable part. And our actions trigger reactions from other people, which could be an event that sets the whole thing in motion again. When kids understand each of these places, each of these ingredients in a feeling story, they're empowered because all of those are points of intervention. Let's take the example of a friend doesn't respond to my text. Super common, right?
Super common.
So there's the event. The thought could be, oh, she hates me. That's it. She's furious at me. If that's the thought, then how are you going to feel? Well, you're going to feel angry and frustrated and anxious. And then the action that might follow from that is texting her 8 more times. Why aren't you answering? Are you mad at me? Are you sure you're not mad at me? Why aren't you answering? And then what kind of reaction is that going to get from the friends? She's probably going to be annoyed, right? So different scenario. The event is the friend doesn't respond. Same event. But this time, one of the things that we know from research is that anger is linked, and in both kids and adults, is linked to assuming deliberate meanness.
Absolutely.
So Chris and I talk about what we call the maybe game. You come up with a lot of different reasons. Maybe she's doing it out of deliberate meanness, but maybe she's busy. Maybe she forgot to charge her phone. Maybe she got in trouble and the parents took the phone. And once we have these maybes, then the deliberate meanness seems a lot less likely. So then our feelings might go with acceptance or compassion. And then with our actions, well, we're not going to harass her, but we could maybe reach out to somebody else or do something distracting. And then we're preserving the friendship and we keep going. Or maybe next time we'll ask her about it and say, hey, what was going on? She goes, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. And then we're communicating and again, preserving the friendship. So each of these points are so important for managing the feelings.
So I'm going to put out a pitch that this is ostensibly a book written for children and perhaps teens. And what's the age group that this is listed for?
6 to 12 is what
6
I think
to 12,
it fits.
yeah. So junior, around early adolescence. I'm going to put out a pitch that adults should read this book, and I'll tell you why. Each of us is walking around with injured inner child. And sometimes when we read these highfalutin books, which I love, sometimes they aren't easy enough to be actionable. And if an adult is to read this and see that this actually is relevant for me too.
That is the number one reaction I get. Yes.
Is that so? And that makes so much sense. So you're talking about the multiplicity of emotions. One of the things I talk about in my TEDx talk is that emotions are kind of social creatures. They don't exist alone. We generally have a multiplicity of emotions, and being able to name them and tame them is essential. You're also talking about something I didn't learn until graduate school. And until that point, I felt almost like I was the unwitting recipient of these emotional experiences, and I didn't know what to do with them. They felt like kind of these one-winged spirals. And what you're giving children at a very young age is tantamount to the cognitive triangle that we learn about in graduate school around thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and how they have these synergistic relationships and how we can name them and get in control of this one-wing spiral and actually right the plane.
So I went to the same kind of grad school you did. And I think that the triangle leaves out the other person.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we'll get to that in a second. And then another thing, because I'm so excited and I just can't hold myself back here.
Good, go for it.
Is a thought that I learned from Harville Hendrix, one of the great voices in relationships. He said something pretty audacious, and I tend to agree. All learning occurs in the context of relationship.
I 100% agree with that. 100%.
So here you are helping children from a young age so that they can have these skills that will relate to their friendships, to their love relationships, to their family relationships. This goes everywhere. And what do we learn when we have a crappy experience? We learn to trust ourselves less. We feel more disempowered. And here you are giving the answers to the toughest exam in the world, and that is how to comport ourselves in the context of relationship. You're giving the answers to the test.
Well, I'm also pointing out that there are many answers.
Exactly.
And that's what I want kids to feel like, is that they have options. Let's say you have a very conflictual relationship with somebody. Sometimes what you want to do is speak up. Sometimes what you want to do is just love the person and accept them because this is the best they can do and forgive them. And sometimes you want to say, you know what? I don't want to be part of this anymore. I'm not going to tell you which is the right answer because that's a deeply personal thing of how we move through the world. One of my favorite things, this was in Growing Friendships, the earlier book, we talk about forgiveness guidelines. So I had a kid in my practice once. It was a young boy and his mom, and we were trying to figure out who he could be hanging out with to boost the friendships. And the mom said, well, how about the kid down the road? And the boy answers, no, because 2 years ago in travel basketball, he never passed the ball. Don't do that. So we came up with the idea of forgiveness guidelines. If it only happened once and it's never likely to happen again, let it go. If it wasn't that big of a deal, let it go. We don't want to be collecting grievances like beads on a string. If the person is genuinely sorry, let it go. If it's never likely to happen again, let it go. If it happened more than a month ago, definitely let it go.
Got it. And that's brilliant. And I didn't mean to imply that there is one answer to any phenomenon that occurs and that there's a multiplicity, as you just said, of possible responses depending on the person. I love the idea that's been coming about that the golden rule is somewhat flawed. Do unto others as you'd want done unto you. Maybe the other person wouldn't want that. Maybe in as much as if I happen to love milk chocolate and my partner loves dark chocolate and she gives me dark chocolate and I give her milk chocolate, we're each giving each other the wrong kind of chocolate. And
Absolutely.
I love the platinum rule that you're basically describing is get to know the other person, do unto them as they would want done, get to know them and live in the world of maybe as well. And the world of maybe is scary because it is ambiguous. And how do you work with that?
So one of the things that we know is that what fuels the development of children's friendships, from the kind of love the one you're with friendships of the toddler years to the more intimate and lasting friendships of the teen years, is an increasing ability to understand someone else's perspective. And so parents often feel very helpless when their kids are struggling socially. This is it. This is one of the main things that we can do, which is gently and with caring, help kids imagine somebody else's perspective. That's what's going to help them to navigate this social world. And it's hard. We adults don't have perfect empathy, but we're figuring it out, and making the effort is so important to let me really try to imagine it from their perspective. It's easier for me to just say, I'm right. But that's the labor of love, right? To really imagine someone else's perspective.
So how do you help foster greater empathy amongst children who are by nature, their neurological development does not necessarily go along with the idea of being anything less than self-absorbed at certain ages? How do you help them foster greater empathy skills?
I love that question. And it's something that I've thought and written about quite a lot. We can see kindness even in the little ones. That there's research that I'm forgetting the ages exactly, but with the little ones, if they see a friend who is crying, they'll bring their mommy over to comfort them. And then around 4, they realize, oh, that kid would rather have his own mommy to comfort them. But just the impulse is just so sweet and lovely. But one of the things, this is the saddest study I ever read. They looked at kids who'd been abused and how they responded when a peer was upset. And the abused kids would sometimes get angry at their peers. Isn't that just heartbreaking? But for most kids, they've received the comfort, and so they try to give that also. But it's hard because just coordinating play with another person, that doesn't, like the cooperative play, that doesn't happen really regularly until about age 5 or 6. They'll do a little bit beforehand, but oh my gosh, it's hard. And we see that even with adults picking a restaurant,
Right.
It's hard. It's hard. So we do want to have parents to help kids to see the other person's perspective. They may or may not go along with that. And maybe I'll insist on what I want because I've got a good reason. Or maybe we'll find a compromise. Or maybe just because I care about you, I'll say, okay, we can go to the place you like, or we can do the thing that you want. And that's just that giving in is not something you do all the time, but sometimes it's a really generous thing to do.
Let's talk about those dance steps, because when we are in conflict, and my favorite definition of conflict is the reality of the perception that if I get what I want, you can't get what you want, or vice versa. And we can't just, of course, as you mentioned, just concede every time. Then we are basically living in kind of an extorted relationship. But right. I'm wondering, what are the dance steps as you see it? And how do you help children find their voice and use that voice in the context of conflict?
So I'm going to tell you a research study that was going to blow you away. Negotiation and compromise, according to this big review study, does not become the main way that children resolve conflicts until age 19. So
that's awesome.
We adults always want kids to talk things out.
Totally.
And yes, they do need to learn to say I statements and to compromise and negotiate and all the rest of it. But the main way that kids resolve conflict is either one of them insists and the other gives in, or they separate for a little bit and then they come back together and just be kind. So I had a little guy in my practice once. He was 6-year-old kindergartner, and he came in and he looked so sad. And he said to me, I lost my best friend today.
Oh my goodness.
And he was just heartbroken. And I said, what happened? And they'd had some kind of conflict. I don't even remember what it was about. And he was convinced that was it, that it was all over. He wouldn't have this relationship anymore. And I said to him, I don't think you lost your best friend. Here's what I want you to do. Tomorrow, when you go into school, I want you to go find your friend and give him a big smile and say hi. And then I want you to have fun with him. And he did. And the friendship was just fine. So sometimes that's the best thing to do. Just separate for a little bit and then try again. Love means trying again. I believe that to my bones. And this is what he did.
That's one of the reasons why I think that even the most sophisticated interventions in couples therapy and relationships in general fall short of the children's rules, like, let's have a do-over.
Yeah.
Can we just
it's
have
a
a
very
do-over?
generous thing. Yes.
Yeah.
No.
Recently,
Sometimes I get kids telling me, oh, my friend and I, we argue all the time. And I'm like, well, then your relationship is probably not going to last, right? Because kids don't necessarily understand that the positives and the negatives are not equal. So if we imagine a friendship like a bag of marbles, every time you do something kind or have fun together, it's like you're adding a marble to the bag. Bit by bit by bit, you're growing the friendship. If you do something mean, woof, it's like you ripped a hole in the bottom of the bag and a bunch of marbles are going to all drain out very quickly. So it can't be equal. And I think from the marital research, we know that it's got to be 7-1 positive to negative,
Is
right?
it now 7-1? I thought it was 5-1, but my goodness.
Oh, I could be wrong.
I like the idea of 7 better, but yes.
It's a lot more positive than,
That's right.
Yeah. So if it's even, that's a sign of a relationship in trouble. If the positives and the negatives are about even. So we really have to think about what can we give in relationships.
I love that idea. And I'm going to say before I even get to my next question, another reason why I would endorse adults reading your book. I have taken great pleasure in reading YA books. They really cut to the heart at times. I've taken great pleasure in talking to a 5th grade teacher in a former episode. He said, if you really want to learn about life, surround yourself with children. They will tell you what's up.
Oh, I couldn't
great?
agree more. Yes. So I have this little podcast. It comes out once a week and it's only 5 minutes long.
Yes.
And it's called Kids Ask Dr. Fantastic. And each episode has an audio recording of a kid saying a first name, doesn't even have to be their first name, and then their age. And then they ask a question about friendship. And then I hold forth for the rest of the 5 minutes. But their questions just blow me away because they are so simple and yet profound. And so I go off on all the big psychology concepts, but also what can you do? Because that's what they need to know is what are my options here? What can I do to repair this relationship, to take care of myself, to define kind friends? And this is the core of life.
Eileen, in preparing for this interview, I geeked out to Dr. Fantastic and I got to hear you do these 6-minute clips that are so profound and so immediately usable. It's almost like an IV of just really, really good information that goes right to the heart. So I love this. And I will have this resource in my show notes for this episode. This is a really huge service that you're doing for children and for grownups, because I found it illuminating and very actionable for me in my own relationships, as well as a therapist who could basically say, this is what you need to do, thanks to Dr. Fantastic.
Oh,
so
it's really a joy for me. Yeah.
I'm definitely a fan. So let's talk about a big part of your work as a pediatric psychologist is working with parents and educating them so that the parents can help reinforce what the children are learning at home. What are the things, like if you had some, like the top 5 things that you want parents to know how to be able to execute on? I'm just going to share one thing that I recently learned about. And that is a man was lamenting to me that when we fight with our spouse, oftentimes the children don't get to see the resolution because we take it privately, which is appropriate. But it's really important that children also get to see the resolution if there is something that the children caught wind of, that watching the repair is super important. But I'm wondering, what are some of the things that you have parents both teach and do that can really help reinforce your work with them?
So one thing is to place a high value on friendship, which means we're all busy, right? But friendships take time. So I think it's really important for our kids to see us making time for our own friends, making the effort to have their friends over. The single best thing you can do to deepen a child's friendships is help them have one-on-one get-togethers with a friend. But, they're little. They depend on us to do that. And sometimes parents are like, oh, but I'm shy. I don't really want to have people over. I'm like, well, and another thing is that I often hear from parents saying that, well, I struggle. Is my kid doomed? No, because what we know from the modeling research is that kids learn best from models who struggle initially and then get it.
Definitely.
So there is nothing more powerful than you can do to show your child that I'm working on this. And so I think the repair is a really good example of that. You screwed up and you had a big argument with your spouse. Yeah, let your kids see the repair and let them see you doing things that are scary. Like, oh, I'm really nervous about calling this person. I don't know her that well, but I want to be friends with her, so I'm going to do it anyway. Oh my gosh, what powerful modeling. Another thing I would say is to help kids learn about feelings. So I'm seeing a lot of things now about treating feelings as too precious or too dangerous, and neither one is important. Like, I think of feelings as they're kind of like smells, they can be pleasant or unpleasant, mild or intense,
Yes.
but they're a source of information about what's going on around us. And it's useful. So even those uncomfortable feelings are useful. And that's what we want to be thinking about. So I'm thinking, for example, of anxiety. Anxiety is really high right now. Yeah, you know, right. And I'm seeing some unhelpful advice about, oh, does that trigger you? You should avoid it. But what we know, the fundamental truth about anxiety is that you got to stay in the water to get used to it. And the corollary to that is no amount of standing at the edge of the water is going to get you used to it. Now, if you want to go in toe by toe, that's fine. I'm definitely a toe by toe person myself. But let's take it to the friendship context. My kid is nervous about going to the party. Okay, then what you need to give them is empathy plus confidence. Empathy that, yeah, this is hard for you. I can see that you're struggling. And I believe in you. I know you can do this. I'm 100% sure. And then the third ingredient, which may or may not be relevant, is sometimes kids need some skills about what to do in social situations, like very concrete, well, what do I say kind of things. So for example, in growing friendships, we talk about greetings. There are 4 steps to a friendly greeting. You look the person in the eye, or if you don't look them if that's uncomfortable for you, look them in the forehead, right in between the eyebrows. From a little bit of a distance, you can't tell the difference.
That's right.
Then you smile to show that you're happy to see the person. Then you say hi, and you say the person's name to make it a personal greeting. So that gets you through the first 3 seconds of an interaction. But a kid who's feeling shy, they're going to look down, look away. But the message that they're communicating is, I don't like you. I don't want anything to do with you. Another thing that we talk about is let's say that we'll stick with the party example. They're going to the party. What am I going to do? They're all going to be having fun and I'm going to be hiding in the bathroom or whatever. Don't hide in the bathroom because that is showing that you don't want to be with them. Researchers have a very specific sequence for how to join a group. Watch, then blend. So watch what the other kids are doing and then slide into the action without interrupting. With older kids, it's the same process, but we talk about it in terms of match the emotional tone of the group. So if everybody's excited about the new collectible and our kid comes in and says, well, that's stupid. I mean, it's just a cardboard with a picture printed on it. That's like a sour note in a melody. La, 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 la. So don't do that. He's either got to ask interested questions or give a compliment, or he's got to find another group where they all hate the collectible. If our girl is coming out of the test and everybody else is complaining about the test and she says, well, I thought it was easy. Oof. She is not matching the emotional tone. Now, she should not pretend that she's stupid because deceit is not a path towards intimacy.
Mm-mm.
But what she could do is match the tone and say, I can't believe there were 4 short answers, or I can't believe we had that the same week that we had the math test. And then she's matching the tone. Another thing that we can, just as a practical skill, a lot of times kids kind of freeze up when people ask them, how are you? And most conversation is not witty repartee, right? It starts with the small talk. And as you mentioned, this is an entree to deeper talk, but you can't skip it really. You got to do the small stuff first. So when we teach a formula that we call the great plus one fact formula, think about it. Somebody asks, let's say, how was your weekend? If you say, fine. That's a conversation ender. Exactly. Right. There's nowhere to go with that. But if we use the formula great plus one fact, where great expresses enthusiasm because that's attractive, and the one fact is something that creates a picture in the listener's mind, that will get the conversation going. So you could say, great, my grandma came over and we went for a hike. Great, my dad made lasagna for dinner on Sunday. Great, I had a soccer game. We lost, but then we got to go out for ice cream. So all of these are a gift because it gets the conversation going. It reaches for that common ground, which is the foundation of friendships. And so sometimes I have kids push back and say, well, do I have to say great? And I usually say, yeah, go for great. Because they go, well, what if nothing was great? Somewhere in the whole thing, you can find something that you can be enthusiastic about. And with these kids who are more reticent, I want them to kind of reach farther for the great. So it's a good idea to practice. Great plus one fact.
Right. And one of the things that you're also helping them do is, yeah, there may have been something that kind of sucked, but you're probably not going to lead with that. And it also helps a child find something awesome within the pile of not so awesome.
Exactly. So one of the things that we talk about is how to deal with grumpy feelings. And at the level of thoughts, we all know about people who see the glass half empty and the people who see the glass half full. And of course, the wisest people see both. But there's another kind of thinking, which I call tiny bit empty thinking. So picture the glass filled to the brim, except for one little drop. With tiny bit empty thinking, we focus only on the little drop and we're missing the whole point, and that's a recipe for misery. So we don't want to do that.
Let's go to the opposite scenario. I'm agreeing with everything, and I want to address one question that the listener may have, and that is, what if things actually kind of suck, like big time? I spent the weekend with my parents. They were fighting. They seemed to be on the brink of divorce. I had 3 cavities the day before, and my favorite team lost. And my parents told me I had to stay in my room while they fought.
Ouch.
Yeah. What if it was like kind of a bag of crap?
That is something to share in an intimate relationship. It's not what you're going to say, hi, nice to meet you. Let me give you the whole back. So I had a client once who was a college girl, and she so wanted a relationship, but her definition of intimacy was sharing our pain. Yes, that's part of it. And that becomes
the sole common denominator.
Right. And I said to her, why are you putting the sole weight on our pain? What about your hopes? What about your joys? What about the gratitude and the tenderness? And isn't that at least as important? And the problem was she would do the sharing our pain thing with people that she didn't know very well. And frankly, the guys would run for the hills.
Right.
So
great to meet you. I'm out.
Right. So intimacy, and we know this from research, it begins little by little. So I share something, then you share something, and then I share a little more, and you share a little more. And that's how we're kind of testing each other out and testing, can I trust you? And we're building it. There's no shortcut here. You got to spend the time. You've got to put yourself out there.
So how do you help a child? I'm going to go to another place with this around discernment. Maybe this is not somebody with whom I should be friends. Actually, this is a person who is snarky and cuts me down, and I end up leaving the interaction feeling diminished.
So isn't that wonderful that you have that inner barometer to tell you, the feelings to tell you, this is not working? I think it is important to talk to kids about both sides of that. Like, how do you feel most of the time in this relationship? So we adults, when our kids have a not so good friend, our tendency is to say, I don't like that kid,
Mm-hmm.
But it's more valuable if we can help our children think it through. How do you feel most of the time when you're with this kid? How would they respond if you were feeling down? Do you feel like you have to act a certain way when you're around them, or do you feel like they accept you as you are? Questions like that. I wrote a blog post about that once, but those will really help kids to think deeply about the relationship. It's sometimes kids stick with a not so good friend because they feel like they have no other options.
Yeah.
So
That's
as a
tough one right
parent,
there.
as a parent, what you can do is use your deep knowledge of your child and think about what is it that they like to do that they could do with other people, and then fan the flames on that. And let's see, kids make friends mostly by doing fun things together. So let's see if we can find them their tribe based on what we know and love about them.
Yeah. So one of the things that I have helped my clients do, they're adults. And so I have something I call the drive-away test. Do you feel taller, stronger, more yourself as you drive away from an interaction?
Oh, I love that.
And I think that for a child to develop that discernment, is this person a match? There'd be a walk-away test, like with a series of questions. And now I want to ask you the tough one, the one that freaks even adults out when they remember this feeling if they experienced it. It's lunchtime. Who am I going to sit with? Am I going to sit alone? So for the person who doesn't necessarily have a friend group, and that question of, do I just tolerate another human body as a friend who actually might not be good for me, actually might be antisocial? Or do I sit alone? Or do I try to access the vulnerability to try to broker a friendship with people with whom I want to be friends? And then, of course, parenthetically, there's the whole thing about, do I try to sit with the popular people for status, which I'm not advised. But I'm wondering, and you do address that in Dr. Fantastic quite a bit, and I love that you do. But I'm wondering, like, let's go to that thought experiment around lunchtime and loneliness.
So this is why with the younger kids, often the seats are assigned, just to kind of skip that.
Okay.
But we can all remember that anguish of, where should I sit? Where do I belong within this group? I would encourage kids not to sit alone, because that kind of signals that I don't want anything to do with you. I would also say, though, that the barrier is not that high for most people. We don't want to be choosing a friend just because they're popular, because if we have nothing in common with them, we're not likely to become friends with them. But if you've had fun with that kid once, that's a good enough justification to sit with them or even to invite them over. And I got a lot of pushback with that from kids about, oh, I don't know them well enough. No, that's backwards. You invite them over or you hang out with them and then you get to know them. It's not like you get to know them and then you do that. You have to be doing these small reach outs. So you can sit down with somebody and that was in your math class and they're pleasant. Know, it's not right.
You get a vibe. This person is pleasant.
Right. Yeah. And then go sit with them. And over time, maybe the friendship will deepen and you can ask interested questions and you can give genuine compliments and you can do fun things with them. And little by little, the friendship might grow. The other thing is, I think a lot of kids are holding out for a best friend, a soulmate. And I tell kids, you only get about 3 of those in your entire life. And I completely made up that number.
That seems about right.
But along the way, and in addition, we can have many other kinds of friends. We can have a bus stop friend. We can have a math class friend. We can have a soccer friend. We can have a neighbor friend. We can have a cousin friend. And each of these friends add to and enrich our life and have value. So we don't have to hold out for a soulmate or nothing.
100%. And I'll tell you how I've even conceptualized this. I see them as superheroes with powers and limited abilities as well. Batman cannot fly, but Batman can do some pretty cool things. And Wonder Woman has her powers and Aquaman has his. And my buddy with whom I talk about sports, we might not talk about feelings as much, but we talk about sports and exchange baseball cards. And then the other person I play sports with, and the other person is more of my academic buddy. We talk about school and things like that. So I love that idea of really letting children know that friendships may have limits and strengths as well. Yeah. And I think that's really, really powerful. I want to go back to something that you said because it's so interesting to me. Empathy, confidence, and skill building. I love the idea of
choice. Yeah.
And choice. And just,
So connection, competence, and choice.
Connection, competence, and choice. I want to go back to the whole competence, I guess, would be kind of, I think about Navy SEAL ops and they require rehearsals. And I think similarly, to engage for the socially anxious requires rehearsal on some level. And I'm wondering what would be some other great rehearsal skills that a parent might be able to do with their children? Because I think that one that for me seems like biggest anxiety reducer of, when we know for sure that if we avoid something, the anxiety will grow and that we do need to actually deal with that thing that scares us, rather than be limited by it.
So one thing is teasing.
Oh, God.
Yes. This is really hard, but it's also part of kid culture.
For sure.
There was an interesting study where the researchers went into a kindergarten classroom at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year and recorded who picked on whom. And at the beginning of the year, pretty much everybody was picked on about the same amount. At the end of the year, only a few kids were consistently picked on, and it was the ones who had the biggest emotional reaction. So I am not defending or excusing or promoting teasing at all or bullying or anything like that. But I do think it's a skill for kids to be able to handle it. And just knowing what to say is good. Now, sometimes kids want a zinger that's going to stop them all at once. Don't do that. It's not going to work. What you want to do is something boring. I'll tell you a story. I had a kid once, and he was on the bus with this really not so kind other kid. And one day, the not so kind kid said to my boy, "You have no friends at all. Everybody hates you." Ouch. Like, what a mean thing to say. But fortunately, my kid was ready. And he said in his most bored voice, "Okay." Conversation ender. And fortunately, there was another kid there who said, "That's not true." So yay for the upstander.
Oh,
but
right
like as soon as he said that, the other kid's thinking, "Well, it's not true. Why are you agreeing with it?" So,
I refuse to give this person a rise and give them what they want.
Exactly. So if you have a very tender-hearted kid, there's a way to rehearse this, which I call nonsense word insults. You give the kid an index cards of things to say. So what? Okay, whatever. Never to an adult. Or tell me when you get to the funny part. Or sometimes you can pretend it's a compliment. Thanks. Or thanks for noticing, depending on what it is. And so you give the kid that list of possible responses that are boring. And then you, the parent, do nonsense word insults like, "You have Grimsy muffs. You always twiggle your twops. You're such a niff-noff." And have the kid respond with one of those, "So what? Whatever. Tell me when you get to the funny part. Think what you like." Okay. And when you do that, then the teasing becomes less important. And they'll remember, oh, that's just like the Grimsy muffs, right?
Eileen, straight up, I would pay a large sum of money to go back in time and have you coach me on that skill. That would have changed everything. That is so good.
I mean, we just want the kids to feel empowered and not to feel devastated. Now, I have to make a distinction here, though, between this teasing and bullying.
Oh, for sure.
So teasing is something that kids can handle on their own and should handle with support from caring adults. Bullying is a different category. And researchers define bullying as deliberate meanness, targeting a specific individual, usually over a period of time, although sometimes one especially awful action can count. And this is the most important part. There's a power difference between the kid doing the bullying and the kid being targeted. And that power difference is what makes it difficult or impossible for the kid being targeted to deal with it. So the kid doing the bullying is bigger, stronger, tougher, more socially powerful, or it's a group of kids picking on one kid. The cute retort is not going to do anything there. Adults have to step in for safety.
It does actually legitimately require adult intervention. And how might a parent give the memo to a child? Hey, listen, this is what I need to know. Like, what would be the things that a child would understand as bullying so that they could actually recognize it if it's happening? Because
I think it's interesting
to tell the parent.
Right. So kids often don't tell because they're afraid the adults are going to make it worse.
That's right. I absolutely had that. You cannot make this up. When I was in fourth grade, an eighth grader. I mean, he was 14 and I was 10. He was bullying me and threatening to beat the crap out of me. 4 years at that age in life is a massive amount.
Right. He's like 50% taller than you.
Oh,
right.
he was huge. And my father, in his wisdom, actually went over to this man's. I was just in a ball waiting for my father to come back. I knew I was going to be on the other side of a whooping the next day at school. My father handled it. It was amazing. And it was one of his great moments. And I was never bullied again by that particular person. Remember, I was terrified that this was going to make things worse.
Right. So your father had some skills about communicating.
He just drove over to that guy's house and talked to the guy's father, and it was like handled.
Good. Well done.
But I'm wondering how we could give those skills to children so they can actually recognize when it's happening and what can be done. Obviously not becoming over reporters, but just the right amount of reporting.
Yeah. So one thing that kids can do is either stand near a friend or stand near a teacher. And that just makes them less of a target for bullying. And that can often be kind of a under the radar way of dealing with things. Another thing that I've sometimes recommended is what I call social control. So if our kid can say something in a loud, carrying voice so that the teacher comes running over, that can be useful. Or so that all the other kids turn and look at that kid, that can be useful.
What would be a statement that they could say in a large, powering voice?
Get your hands off me.
I like that.
Quit touching me. Mm-hmm. Boom. Everybody's going to go look at that kid. Mm-hmm. Or another one that I've done with girls more often, it's verbal bullying. So I've had girls say, that was a mean thing to say, and then walk away. And everybody's turning around and looking at the girl who said that. It's social control. Cool. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And our kid didn't say, there's no swear words in there. Like, take a transcript. I said, get your hands off me. That was a mean thing to say.
I didn't say
no bad words there. Right.
Insulting to the other individual. I was literally just saying what I wanted at that moment.
Right. But saying it loud enough that everybody looks.
For sure.
Yeah. Not a guarantee. None of this is a guarantee, but it's an option and it can make a kid feel empowered. And that's something that in my practice, I would drill a kid on it. But parents also practice so that the kid knows it. Because if you say, get your hands off me, not going to cut it. It's like, come on, project.
Step into your power.
This is wrong. Quit touching me.
And we know that we humans are wired towards being bystanders, especially when we're in larger groups. And the likelihood.
But even the eyes can be useful. Just everybody looking at them.
For sure.
So,
yeah. Phenomenal. Eileen, is there anything I should have asked but haven't yet asked?
So I think we really have such an opportunity with children to teach them about how to make and keep friends, how to deal with their emotions about friends, in order to build strong and caring relationships. And that's what Chris and I tried to do in our 2 books, Growing Friendships, which is a kid's guide to making and keeping friends, and Growing Feelings, which is a kid's guide to dealing with emotions about friends and other kids. This is so fundamental. This is equipping children for life to deal with the situations that they're going to have to deal with. One of the things that I believe as parents, one of our most fundamental responsibilities is to teach kids how to be in relationships. Like after keeping them alive, That's kind of what we're doing day in and day out. How do we respond when someone is hurting? What do we say when we're angry? How do we move past a rough patch and try again tomorrow? Like all of this is so profound and so complicated and so important.
Could not agree more. I said it to you offline. I'll say it again for the listeners. These skills, if given to children at a young age, will have compounding interest for the rest of their lives. So I am beyond excited. And now I'm going to ask you my final and miracle question. If you, Eileen, had the magical power to confer upon all humanity one insight or skill that would dramatically improve the lives of individuals and perhaps even society at large, what would that skill or insight be? And how do you imagine it would affect individuals as well as possibly society?
I think I would go with love means trying again, because we're all going to screw up multiple times. But to show up and try again, that's the foundation of our relationships. That's the foundation of our society. We can think of all kinds of errors that we've made as a society. Okay, what are you going to do next? Love means trying again. So that would be what I would do.
Love that. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with my listeners
my pleasure.
And with the world through your book that you co-wrote with Chris. It is a gift. I hope it does get parachuted all over the planet and that we'll feel the ripple effects, because we would feel the ripple effects if people got this memo. So thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure, Adam.
This is Dr. Adam Dorsey thanking you for listening to Super Psyched. If you know anyone who might like it or who might benefit from listening, share it. And if you like the episode, please hit subscribe